There are stories the Ministry tried to erase, tales too dark, too human to survive the retelling. Most wizards remember only the serpent served as Voldemort's weapon, the whisperer of Parseltongue, the bearer of a Horcrux, the creature who ended Snape and carried the Dark Lord's curse. But that is not where her story begins. Ah, greetings, traveller. You've found your way back to the Silver Quill Corner. I am Grayfin, the storykeeper. Long ago, when I was bound to an ancient wizarding family, I learned that stories carry a magic older than time itself. Here we drift through bedtime stories drawn from every corner of imagination. Gothic myths, lost histories, and quiet retellings inspired by the magical universe of Harry Potter. If the murmur of quills and the echo of old corridors bring you peace, press like, subscribe. It truly helps the algorithm carry these tales to more dreamers. The brighter our flame burns, the greater the worlds we can conjure together. The bells have been heard across the world tonight. Tell me, Keeper, from what city, realm, or corner of the world are you listening? I'd love to know how far these stories have reached. Her story begins far from Britain's cold spires, in a land of tangled jungles and endless rain, where the air hums with ancient magic and the soil remembers every whisper of it. There, beneath canopies older than empires, legends tell of a bloodline touched by mercy and cursed for it. A woman once spared a serpent's life, an act of compassion forbidden by the old laws of her tribe. For that defiance, the curse took root in her blood, passing from mother to daughter, a sleeping venom that would one day awaken and devour its host from within. Centuries faded. The world forgot the name of that first woman, but the curse endured. From that quiet, haunted lineage, Nagini was born, a maledictus, a woman fated to lose herself piece by piece, until the beast beneath her skin no longer slept. Each dawn she woke, praying the change would not come. Each night she dreamed of hands, a voice, a face, fragments of the humanity she still fought to keep. One day, the curse would win, and the world would remember only the serpent, never the girl who tried again and again to wake as herself. By 1927, she had become both wonder and prisoner. Beneath the velvet canopy of Skender's Circus Arcanus in Paris, she performed for wizards and muggles alike. Nagini danced her tragedy for coin. They called her the Enchantress of Scales, the woman who could step from skin to serpent, a miracle caught between beauty and horror. The woman who could shed her skin and rise again as an emerald serpent. Each night she bowed beneath the spotlights, and the crowd gasped as her bones melted to emerald sinew, her eyes glinting gold beneath the hiss of transformation. But when the curtain fell and the torches dimmed, each return to flesh came slower than the last. Each performance left another piece of her behind. The audience saw only wonder. They never saw the shaking hands, the cold sweat, nor how her smile became a mask, or how her eyes lingered on the curtains longer each night, the faint dread of knowing that one night she would shed her skin and never come back. There are stories the Ministry erased from every record, tales too dark or too human to survive the retelling. Most wizards remember her only as Shadow and Fang, the serpent coiled beside the Dark Lord, the whisperer of Parseltongue, the creature who struck down Severus Snape and bore within her body a fragment of Voldemort's own soul. But that is not where her story begins. In that same circus wandered a boy, thin, quiet, breakable as glass, haunted by a power he neither wanted nor understood. He lived behind the velvet tents and rusted cages, a shadow drifting through sawdust and smoke. When Nagini first saw him, the air between them shifted, as if two storms had recognized one another. His name was Credence Barebone, a boy with ruin for a heartbeat, and darkness coiled beneath his ribs like a waiting spell. It was not love that passed between them. It was recognition. the silent, aching kind shared by those the world has already broken. He carried a darkness he could not master. She carried one she could never escape. And in each other's gaze, they found proof that their pain was real. At night, while the circus slept, they spoke in whispers between the cages. Two outcasts shaped by forces they could not unmake. Sometimes, when she changed beneath the torches, he turned away, not from horror but from sorrow, for every transformation took something from her, a breath, a memory, a piece of warmth she'd never feel again. Still, they dreamed. For a moment, they believed that understanding might be enough to save them. But the world has never been kind to miracles. As Grindelwald's banners unfurled and the air thickened with his promises, Nagini's curse deepened. Her transformations lengthened, her reflection flickering between faces. Human, serpent, human again, until she no longer knew which belonged to her. The serpent within her stirred more often now, its whispers curling through her thoughts like smoke through silk. Still she fought. For every breath that was her own, for every heartbeat that still sounded human. No curse strikes all at once. It unravels softly, patient as regret, peeling away the soul until memory is all that remains. And then, one dawn, as the first light touched her skin, Nagini felt the silence where her pulse had been. Her voice was gone, her warmth gone. Only the serpent remained. In the records from the East, they speak of a woman who vanished and of a serpent that haunted the edges of legend. The world remembered the monster. It forgot the girl. But tonight, beneath the low light of the silver quill, we remember both. At night, her eyes began to change, slitted, patient, unblinking. They reflected the creature waiting beneath her skin, the fate that crept closer with every breath. Each morning she fought to return to herself, to feel the warmth of her own lungs, the steady rhythm of a heartbeat still human. But curses do not strike like lightning. They move like weather, slow, deliberate, unstoppable. They erode what they touch. First the small things, the sound of your own name, the warmth of touch, the ease of forgetting pain. Layer by layer, they peel away what makes you you, until only memory remains. And one dawn, when sunlight broke through the tent slats, Nagini did not rise. She uncoiled. The scream that left her throat was a hiss, a sound that belonged to no human world. She waited for the spell to loosen, for her hands to remember gentleness. It never came. The curse had taken its due. Her body no longer answered her will, yet her mind remained, lucid, mourning. In the silence after the crowd, she felt herself fading, a ghost inside her own body. Years folded in on themselves. The serpent drifted through jungles drowned in rain, temples overgrown with roots, and the ruins of old circuses where the wind still echoed with applause. To those who glimpsed her, she was not creature but myth, a whisper of scales and sorrow gliding through the mist. Sometimes she lifted her head toward the moon and swayed to music only she could hear, the laughter of crowds, the promise of a boy who once called her by name. The jungle became her cathedral. Roots cradled her, rain kept her company. Magic thickened in her veins until she was neither beast nor relic, but something in between, a living myth carved from endurance. Time lost its meaning. Empires rose and fell beyond her knowing, and when the Dark Lord fell in 1981, his fractured soul scattered like ash, and one ember drifted into the same forgotten forests of Albania, where Nagini hunted alone. Those woods were older than language, a refuge for the half-alive and the wholly damned. There, in the hush of ruin and leaf-fall, destiny stirred again. Tom Marvolo Riddle was no longer the boy from Hogwarts. His beauty had thinned, his humanity had burned away. He wandered the edges of death, seeking dominion over it. Whispers reached him of a serpent vast and untamable, immune to magic. He did not hunt her for sport. but for possibility. Moonlight poured over her scales like liquid glass when their paths crossed. Two predators beneath one sky, each recognizing the ruin in the other. Their eyes met, hers dark, mournful, centuries deep, his brilliant and starving. Then he spoke, not in any human tongue, but in the lost language of serpents, Parcel Tongue. For the first time in decades, someone answered her. He asked her name. She replied, Nagini. That single exchange bound them. He saw her curse, her loneliness, her power. She saw purpose, and the echo of someone unafraid to face her. He promised understanding, a place beside him in the world he would rebuild. And though she could not yet see the abyss behind his charm, she followed, a soul drawn to the first voice that spoke her language without fear. In his presence, she found a strange calm. He never flinched from her hiss or shadow. He called her beautiful, not for kindness, but for proof that magic could outlive flesh. He studied her, fed her, listened when she thought no one could. And in time, she became his guardian, his weapon, and, unknowingly, his vessel, the cradle for a fragment of his fractured soul. But that tale waits still, coiled in the dark like prophecy. For now, the forest sleeps, two shadows sharing the same firelight, a young wizard dreaming of dominion, and a serpent dreaming of being understood. Neither yet knows how completely they will destroy each other. Years drifted past like smoke through a graveyard. Tom Riddle shed his name as a snake sheds its skin, and from the hollow that remained, a legend began to breathe. By then, he had opened the Chamber of Secrets, spoken with the serpent of Salazar himself, and perhaps in that echo of scales and whisper, he felt a strange recognition when he found her again. He no longer called himself Tom. He had become something colder, sharper, a being who believed neither in death nor in love, only in the permanence of his own will. The world would come to know him as Lord Voldemort, and always beside him, gliding through the dark like a living shadow, was the serpent he called Nagini. Together they moved through forgotten corners of the earth, through catacombs thick with dust, through ruins where even ghosts dared not linger. They hunted relics older than memory, rings that murmured of resurrection, cups kissed by founders, daggers that remembered blood. To others, she was his weapon. To him she was something closer, the one creature left who could answer him in the language of serpents. In the quiet cadence of hiss and breath, he spoke of a world remade, a realm cleansed of weakness, ruled by the eternal. She listened, not as servant, but as something far more dangerous. For devotion is not always born of love. Sometimes it grows out of loneliness. To most, Voldemort's voice was terror itself, cold, precise, merciless. But to Nagini, it was a mirror. She did not hear cruelty in his words. She heard her own solitude echoed back. In him she saw the same hunger, to be seen, even by darkness itself. When his mortal body was destroyed in Godric's Hollow, the world believed him gone. But Nagini remained. She coiled in silence among the ruins, guarding the faint, fractured spark of what he had been. Years later, when his spirit returned to the forests of Albania, it was her venom, ancient and potent, that completed the dark alchemy of his rebirth. Her poison mingled with blood and bone, binding his new body to the living world. They were no longer master and pet, but two beings tethered by survival. Then came Bertha Jorkins, a witch from the ministry, bright and curious, on holiday in Albania, far from the safety of her world. Fate, or something crueler, led her into the path of Peter Pettigrew, a trembling shadow of a man who still served his master in exile. He greeted her with false warmth, guided her down a forest path slick with rain, and handed her over to the thing that waited in the dark. Voldemort was a whisper then, a shape of smoke and hunger barely tethered to life. Yet even weakened, his mind was a blade. He tore into hers, peeling back memories like pages from a book, ripping secrets of the ministry, of Hogwarts, of Barty Crouch Jr. reborn. When there was nothing left to take, he rewarded her silence with death. But murder was only the beginning. The ritual that followed was older than mercy. The air thickened until even the forest seemed to retreat. Voldemort drew runes in the dirt, words leaking from his tongue like venom. From the ruin of his chest tore a shard of soul, raw, glowing, screaming, and he pressed it into Nagini. She felt it burn through every vein of her curse, rooting deep, binding her life to his. For him, it was triumph, a Horcrux that breathed, obeyed, endured. For her, it was violation, a second curse within the first, one she could never shed. When it ended, Bertha lay still, and the forest went quiet again. Voldemort's voice, thin and triumphant, rose through the smoke. Now we are bound. And so they were. The Dark Lord and the Serpent, two souls stitched together by murder, each keeping the other from the grave. As the Dark Lord's power swelled, so too did hers. His cruelty was her current, his ambition, the fire that kept her curse alive. Her venom thickened, laced now with the echo of immortality, a toxin that no healer, mortal or magical, could name. Her senses sharpened until deceit itself had a scent, cold metal, sour breath, the faint sting of cowardice. At Death Eater gatherings, she moved between them like judgment incarnate, a ribbon of darkness threading through torchlight and fear. Whispers stilled wherever she passed. The air bent around her, and one flicker of her tongue could strip the truth from a liar's soul faster than any spell. Some said she no longer fed on blood alone, but on the pulse of terror itself, that her eyes caught the last emotion of those she killed and held it, like a memory trapped behind glass. Voldemort would watch those eyes sometimes, not out of affection, but fascination, for there he saw his cruelty made perfect. And yet, in the still hours when firelight faltered and the castle's stone corridors sank into silence, he would sometimes reach out and trace her scales. She did not recoil. No words passed between them, only a quiet, weighted stillness, a communion of monsters. It was not love. He was incapable of that. Two beings carved from the same loneliness, each having turned isolation into power, each mistaking survival for purpose. The Ministry of Magic slept under its own secrets. Far below the atrium, in the Hall of Prophecy, Arthur Weasley kept watch among endless rows of glass spheres, each humming softly with someone's forgotten fate. From the darkness between them came movement, slow, deliberate, hisses of majestic, agile beast. Nagini glided out of shadow, her body a ripple of living malice. The light shimmered along her scales like moonlight on oil. Harry Potter saw it before it happened. Through the fracture in his soul, that accidental thread between Horcruxes, he felt her hunger, her coiled patience, the intoxicating rhythm of another's heartbeat in his mouth. When her fangs sank deep, Arthur's blood bloomed through the air like spilled ink. Miles away, the boy woke, screaming. Dumbledore understood then what few ever could. Two vessels of the same broken spirit reaching for one another across the fabric of magic itself. From that night onward, Harry carried her visions. He saw corridors that pulsed like arteries. He heard whispers older than human speech. He felt thoughts that were not his own, cold, sinuous, endless. He did not yet know her name, only her hunger. Before those visions ever found him, in a graveyard at Little Hangleton, the ritual of rebirth began. From blood, bone, and murder, the Dark Lord rose again, reborn in the shape of his own ambition. And through the mist that followed, she came. The Death Eaters parted as the serpent approached, her scales gleaming like wet obsidian under moonlight. Voldemort reached down, pale fingers tracing the curve of her skull, a gesture that looked almost gentle. In that touch lay their entire history, Master and Horcrux, Creator and Reflection, each the last remnant of the other's soul. From that moment, Nagini became executioner and sentinel. She killed not for hunger, but for command. Betrayers, spies, prisoners. Each fell in silence, their final breath devoured by the whisper of scales. Godric's Hollow, Christmas Eve, 1997. Snow fell in hushed layers over the graveyard, where the past slept uneasy. Inside the crooked house of Batilda Bagshot, death wore a new disguise. Nagini had been placed there by her master, inhabiting Batilda's hollowed body like a suit of flesh. Her skin hung loose, her smile wrong, her eyes too still. When Harry Potter entered, she watched through borrowed sockets, breathing through lungs that were no longer her own. And when the moment came, the body collapsed. The serpent burst free, and the house erupted in spellfire and splinters. Harry escaped, but the trap had served its purpose. The serpent had carried her master's gaze to him. Through Nagini, Voldemort had looked directly into the boy's eyes again. Months later, at Malfoy Manor, her presence hung heavier than smoke. The prisoners were dragged in. Hermione Granger's screams laced the air like threads of glass. Nagini watched, golden eyes unblinking, not cruel, not kind, merely witness. Some said her venom burned hotter when it touched despair. When Bellatrix's knife spun end over end and struck down Dobby the free elf, Nagini recoiled, coiled and stilled, as if even she felt the tremor of something innocent dying. May 1998, the Battle of Hogwarts. The Dark Lord's faith in her had become ritual. He no longer saw her as companion or weapon, but as proof that he had conquered mortality, that his soul could live, breathe, and kill in another form. Her existence was his private victory, a Horcrux that obeyed and thought, a living tether between man and monster, master and mirror. Yet even Voldemort, for all his brilliance, did not understand what he had made. He tied himself not only to her strength, but to the faint ember of humanity still buried in her. Through that ember a thread began to weave, fragile, forbidden, a pulse of compassion his own heart could not recognize. Sometimes, when she watched him from the edge of the firelight, she felt what it once meant to care. And sometimes, when his rage cracked the air, there was a flicker, so brief it almost wasn't there, as if the serpent's sorrow brushed against his thoughts. Two beings, both too broken to love, bound by a single dying heartbeat never meant to be shared. And when the order came, in the shrieking shack, she obeyed. Voldemort's voice, calm as winter steel, cut through the noise. Nagini struck. Severus Snape fell, and with him the final thread of Voldemort's misplaced trust. The serpent that once danced under velvet lights was now the blade, the witness, the living prison of his immortality. Yet somewhere deep within, beneath centuries of venom and silence, a ghost still stirred. The faint echo of applause, the warmth of a human pulse, and the memory of a woman who once fought to wake as herself. That ghost would not rest, not until the very end. In the months that followed, Voldemort's paranoia ripened into obsession. He trusted no one, not even his own shadow, except for her, Nagini, the living vault, the last secret between him and the grave. He wrapped her in enchantments older than language, spells that bent light, warped sound, and made the very air hum with dread. To his followers, she was untouchable. To him, she was sacred. The others, the cup, the diadem, the ring, were relics. But she was alive. She was him. And yet, even Horcruxes bleed. When Harry Potter and his friends uncovered the truth, that the serpent was no mere monster, but the living lock on Voldemort's soul, they understood what it meant. To kill her was to unmake him, and to reach her was to face the end of everything. Then came the Battle of Hogwarts. Spells tore through corridors, stones screamed, and the castle itself seemed to mourn. Amid the chaos, Voldemort stood apart, aloof, spectral, more shadow than man. Beside him floated Nagini, sealed within a globe of shimmering magic, her coils drifting like a storm held in glass. Every time another Horcrux was destroyed, she convulsed, for each fracture in his soul echoed through the tether that bound them both. When Harry walked into the forbidden forest to meet his death, Nagini's eyes followed him, unblinking, golden, and for the briefest moment, aware. As the green light struck and silence fell, she felt it, a thread snapping somewhere deep inside, the faint hum that had always connected her to another, gone. A stillness she hadn't known in decades. It almost felt like peace. Then the war roared back to life. Voldemort unleashed her once more. She struck like vengeance itself, a living tempest of scales and venom. Through the smoke and ruin stepped Neville Longbottom, the boy her master's cruelty had orphaned in all but name, his clothes torn, his face streaked with ash and blood, but his eyes burned with something Voldemort had long forgotten existed, hope. In his hands, he carried the sword of Gryffindor, its edge alive with the light of every brave heart that had ever wielded it. Forged by courage, tempered in justice, and now glistening with the venom of a serpent long dead, the one that had once struck and failed to kill a boy in a crib. Fate, it seemed, had a sense of symmetry. Nagini rose from the broken stones, her coils shimmering with cold fury, eyes burning with the shadow of her master's will. For one suspended moment, the hall fell silent, time holding its breath as predator faced prophecy. Then she struck. The air cracked like thunder. The sword flashed once, a streak of crimson and silver, and found its mark. Steel met scale, magic met destiny, and the serpent screamed. The sound tore through the chamber, a cry that was not rage but release, as if the very curse that had bound her was finally being unspooled by the hand of fate. The protective enchantment shattered like glass in a hurricane. Light and shadow collided, and when the brilliance faded, Nagini lay still upon the stone. Her coils slackened, her breath stilled, and for a heartbeat, just one, those who stood nearest swore they saw her eyes flicker, not with hatred, not with fear, but with peace. The faint, impossible peace of a woman who had waited a century to be freed from her own skin. Then the light dimmed, and the serpent's body turned quiet, the last echo of her curse dissolving into dust and dawn. Voldemort turned, and in that instant, he knew. The silence inside him was absolute. The last piece of himself that could ever feel anything was gone. When he fell moments later, it was not just the death of a tyrant. It was the end of a curse. Serpent and master, two souls twisted by the same longing, unraveled together, and for the first time in their long cursed existence, the world exhaled. After the war, the castle slept. Its walls, once filled with the cries of battle, now hummed with silence. Among the ruins, the serpent's body was found, vast coils of green and silver charred by spellfire. She was burned quietly, without ceremony. No tomb, no plaque, no name. To most, she was nothing more than Voldemort's weapon, the final barrier between his broken soul and the death he refused to face. But those who watched the pyre said otherwise. They swore that when the flames rose high, something shimmered above them, faint as breath, like a woman stepping out of her own shadow, perhaps mercy. Or perhaps, after a lifetime of bondage, Nagini finally slipped her skin for the last time, returning not to darkness, but to peace. No mention of her remains in the Ministry's archives, nor in Dumbledore's letters. It's as if the world itself chose to forget her, and maybe that forgetting was the only kindness it ever offered. But some questions never rest. Did Voldemort ever truly know who she was? Did he see the woman inside the serpent, or only the mirror of his own corruption? Could he have freed her, as some believe, the way he rebuilt his own shattered body? Or did the Horcrux bind her so completely that the curse became her soul? Others whisper she stayed not out of obedience, but out of pity, that in the boy with no mother she saw a reflection of Credence and of herself. And a few, the dreamers, say their bond was something stranger, not love, not servitude, but the meeting of two cursed beings who mistook survival for destiny. What do you believe, travelers? For every story of darkness is, in its quietest moment, a story of someone who tried to stay human. And so, beneath the ashes of war and time, the tale of Nagini closes, not as a chronicle of evil, but as the tragedy of a woman born into a curse she could not escape. She was never the serpent by nature, only by fate. Every soul she touched, Credence, Voldemort, even Harry, reflected a fragment of her sorrow. How love can decay into need, how hope can twist into obedience, and how even monsters ache to be understood. If there is mercy in magic, it lies in remembrance, in keeping the forgotten from fading into myth. And that is what we do here, beneath the silver quill's glow. If this tale stirred something in you, a theory, a question, a shiver, leave your mark below. Was Nagini a victim or a willing companion? Did the Horcrux consume her humanity, or was her soul already slipping away long before Voldemort found her? Could she have remembered Credence in her final moment, or was the woman long gone, leaving only the serpent to die? Your thoughts are the echoes that keep these stories alive, and if you wish to wander further with us, lend your quill to ours. Subscribe not merely to a channel, but to a sanctuary of stories, a place where the forgotten breathe again, and where every shadow hides a spark of light. Until the next tale finds you, travel gently through the dark.